good friend Paul Melia out of Ireland with our theme song. Paul has been on here and described his composing and his OCD, and I've been on his podcast in Ireland as well too. So we love you, Paul. Always glad to have your music with us and to show people out there in the world that people with OCD don't have to let OCD stop you from doing the things that you love, and you can live the life that you want. Once again, welcome to our Wednesday night webinar brought to you by NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Check us out at nocd.com. We do teletherapy across the United States, all 50 states. We take insurance, and we're also in Canada, the UK, and Australia as well too. Tonight, a very special guest, and welcome, Michelle. I am so happy to have you here with us tonight. You know, we see each other on the onlines all the time, so you know, it's and since we haven't seen each other for 2 years now because of the COVIDs, I'm so happy to have my friends come and join me now and then so that we can have some time together. Hopefully this year the conferences will be back live again. It would be wonderful to be in the midst of everybody in person, but we'll see how it goes. But Michelle, why don't you introduce yourself and tell all of our friends out there what you do and who you are, and then we're going to go through some Q's and A's and have some fun tonight. Okay.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to be here, and it's fun to see you on screens. Can't wait till the conference, and we can all maybe hug. One big group hug, right?
Who knows?
So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Los Angeles, California. I specialize in treating OCD and OC spectrum disorders, including BFRBs, tic disorders, all the anxiety disorders. I always leave something out, hoarding disorder. I used to be the associate clinical director at UCLA's in OCD IOP. And actually just before COVID, my son was born and I decided to not go back. And who knew COVID was going to happen? It was all going to be this way anyway. But so I just have my private practice. I shouldn't say just, but I have a private practice. And I have a couple clinicians who work with me in my private practice. And I love what I do. So I'm here.
Yeah, I joined NoCD a month and a half before the first case of COVID hit. And it was interesting. The second case of COVID in the United States was at the hospital system that I had left a month and a half before. Literally, case number 2 was in the hospital across the parking lot from the behavioral health hospital where I was doing work out of.
So crazy.
Yeah. So sometimes things happen in life. You're just like, wow, where did that come from? Yeah.
I know. It does. So who knew we'd end up here, but here we are.
Well, I always love to start with our guests of any starting off, words of hope, wisdom, encouragement, things that you like to give to people in the OCD and related, of course, disorders world, as you said, BFRBs and tics and hoarding and all of those kinds of things too. And believe me, we will be bombarded. We won't get through a tenth of the questions that will come through tonight. We'll be bombarded with them, which I love all my listeners every week who come through with this. And it's always great to see people who come back. And after a while, you'll see on there, Michelle, too, they just start, since I can't get to all their, they start answering questions for each other.
Right, it's great.
They're like mini therapists. They're wonderful. So big applause to all of them out there who support each other. But, I'll give you a little floor first. If there's any things that, like your thing, your spin, I always talk about don't try harder, try different, but we've all got our little thing. So what's yours?
I don't know that I have a thing. I always steal everybody else's thing, although I give everybody credit. I do. Kim Quinlan, I always steal her, it's always a beautiful day to do hard things. I think, it's such, I think one thing I talk to my clients about is that the awesome thing about OCD is it's so treatable. There's so many disorders that are not treatable, that there is hope once you're in the right treatment and just finding the right therapist for you, that there is hope and life can look different. There are people who have gone from not being, functional and, stuck in bed all day to like having full careers and everywhere in between. And that just because you're struggling with OCD today doesn't mean that that's going to be your tomorrow. And I love the community, as you said, like everybody starts answering each other's questions. I think that's fantastic. I think our community is so rich like that there are so many advocates and there's so many people who are willing to help everybody sort of like get to the next level, that we're all here. You know, and one thing I talk about, in LA, there's as many OCD therapists as there are Starbucks. We're on every street corner, and yet we're all full, and we could use more. And so I always talk about the fact that, like, we're here. I'm happy to give referrals to other therapists that I know, because I know they're all great, and I know that they're doing their stuff. And so I'm happy to help promote them. It's not us against them or me against them.
Oh, yeah.
So I love this, you know, I love this community.
Yeah, that's what I've liked about an OCD too, getting to meet people across the country and partner with organizations and groups and everything too, for back and forth referrals and things of that nature. So it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's go into our questions. Kevin says, I struggle with groinal responses, which is related to my contamination OCD. Before leaving the bathroom, I use dirty soap first, then clean soap next. Tell me where I'm wrong. Well, I can go with that, but I go, Michelle. Where might there be a problem in that one right there, if you want?
I always love when people have like dirty versus clean.
Yeah.
Everything, you know, the example I used with one of my clients the other day, we were talking about showering. And I said, you know, our showers are really like, and the same thing with hand washing, is really like a car from a car lot, right? You buy your car, and as soon as you drive it off, you depreciate, or the car depreciates. The minute we like are done washing our hands, or the minute we're out of the shower, we're contaminated again. You know, if you're thinking contamination, right? Because there's stuff everywhere. So, you know, why even bother with a clean soap and a dirty soap? Just why even bother soap? But CDC says soap these days, so I'm going with that. But really just not having trying not to compartmentalize things. I think that's so many people with OCD do that. Is like, I have my clean clothes and my dirty clothes, or I have my like clean room, or this seat in my car is clean, and trying to not get contaminated, instead leaning into that contamination.
I've always wondered how soap can become dirty if soap cleans something. Like, if I stuck my finger in an entire thing of laundry detergent, would it now be dirty and not be useful to the laundry anymore? Right?
Yep.
Yeah. I got into an argument once with someone who said, you know, when you put laundry into the the machine, there's the agitator, right? And if your underwear touches the top, a little microcosm of poop could get on it, and then when you're taking the laundry out of it, it could pick that microcosm of poop back up again. And now and we were going back and forth, and finally I said to her, are you wearing underwear right now? And she said yes. I said, well, then aren't you already sitting in microcosms of poop right now? Oh, she didn't like that, you know.
No.
Because people get stuck in this notion, right, of there are these categories, like you were saying. And one of the things I think that we really try to do as OCD therapists is to break these categories down and just show people that the world is not all or nothing the way OCD wants you to believe that it is. And it's the way that OCD tortures you, because it gets you to believe that you could live in a world of all or nothing. You could be totally clean or not, but that just doesn't happen. That's just not the way that it works.
No. And I think it's really just how, you know, I think we stole this from Lee Baer, but we could never figure it out if it was him who said it, is that it's not a situation that creates the emotion, it's your interpretation of it. So you and I both put our hand in the soap, and if you think it's dirty and I think it's clean, who's right?
Right. Yeah, we don't know, right?
No.
3 people in front of an elevator.
I'm female, I'm always right, but you know.
Yeah, well. I've used the example, 3 people in front of an elevator. A 4-year-old kid thinks it's totally awesome. A woman who works in an office building says, I just need to get to my job. And a guy with an elevator phobia runs away and takes the stairs. 3 people experience the exact same stimuli. How can it be all of those things at the same time? How can it be neutral, frightening, and exciting all at the same time? Because the fact is it is neutral, and it's subject to perception or interpretation. And so many people get caught up in that notion that, well, my OCD interpretation, what if, our favorite phrase, what if it's the right interpretation, right? And then all hell breaks loose and bad things happen and everything like
Exactly.
Vanessa says, my exposures have turned into compulsions. I try not to test feelings toward that trigger. How can you focus on not letting that happen and work on prevention? Keep up the awesome work, Dr. McGrath. Well, thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate it. This is always a fun conversation to have, right? When OCD turns treatment into the subject of OCD, right? all
Right.
because OCD doesn't want to go away. It's like, oh, let's screw with therapy then. And then, if you want to get rid of me, you have to do perfect treatment. As long as you do perfect
Right.
treatment, then you can get rid of me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know. And I tell clients anything can become a compulsion, right? There's that fine line between, I go to the bathroom and I wash my hands. Washing my hands isn't a compulsion until I'm, doing it a certain way, right? Or for 10 minutes or whatever. And so it's anything can become, and then we tell our clients this all the time, right? Anything can become a compulsion. So it's any of your exposures, especially if you're looking for some certainty. And so it's what I tell my clients is always changing up that exposure so that you don't get too attached to one thing. There isn't one right thing to do each time.
I was talking to someone recently also who thought, I have to turn everything into an exposure in order for exposure and response prevention therapy to work. And I have to make it the worst case scenario that it can be in order to get the most out of it. And I said, and look, your life is miserable. Why don't we just live life for a few days without doing any of that and just see what it's like at that level before we even attempt to make it even worse and feel overwhelmed. You come into sessions constantly and feeling overwhelmed and tearful and crying and wondering why things aren't getting better. And all you're doing is trying to throw yourself into level 10s constantly all day long, thinking that that's the only way I'm going to get better. And it's not.
Right. Mm-mm.
OCD has, again, used its stupid little jackass trickery that it loves to do and get you thrown off of treatment by telling you this is the only way to do it. And when OCD's advice is out there, it's never the best advice.
No, it's a bully. It wants your lunch money, right? So it's going to do whatever it can to get your lunch money.
Michelle, by the way, I haven't received your check this week for the lunch money that you owe me. So if you want to get that in the mail at the end of tonight,
I'll send you cryptocurrency.
Oh, even better. Okay, my accountant hates that. I don't know why. Let's see. Catherine says, "Good evening. First off, say happy to be here. Always wonderful. Good. Always appreciate the words of wisdom and the humor. We have to have some humor in this,
We have
right?
to.
Yeah.
You go crazy otherwise."
There's an Onion article that I just saw on the OCD. Did you see that?
I did. I didn't read it, but I saw the caption and I thought that was funny.
For all of you who want to check it out, the Onion's a satirical newspaper, and the Onion, the headline is "Woman accepts the possibility of burning down the apartment building with her stove and becomes fine with it." Just things that we want people to do.
That's what happens. Exactly. Yeah.
She says, "I'm suffering what they call the second arrow of suffering." Well, I wonder, I never know who they are, so I'm always interested when I'm told with what they call, because I still don't know there. Have you heard of the second arrow of suffering, Michelle?
They talk a lot about in self-compassion, and I actually again learned from Kim Quinlan. Okay. She talks a lot about it. Kristen Neff talks a lot about it of if you get into a car, this example, get into a car accident, and then you just beat yourself up for the fact that well, if I was on time, then I wouldn't have gotten into this car accident. It's my fault, and just kind of beating yourself up instead of having some compassion for yourself. So that's where that second arrow comes in.
Gotcha. Okay. Wonderful. When an OCD episode of fear occurs, I constantly obsess, beat myself up, and then ruminate on the subject for sometimes hours. Any help on how to turn my brain off when this happens?
I just wish we had a switch or David Burns always talks about this switch that you can turn down the volume button on. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. I think this is where I always tell clients, you're old, no offense, you're old enough, but some of my clients who are young, they don't know what clip art is, right? I always remember the 90s version of clip art, and there's this head that the brain is open, you can see the brain. Oh, yeah. I always think of OCD like that as this sticky part, right? And if I could just put my hands, my clients who are sitting there washing their hands, right? I can prevent them from getting into the bathroom. But when you're doing rumination or other mental compulsions, I can't just stick my hand on your brain and get it to stop, right? And so you actively have to make the decision not to sit and ruminate, right? We tell our clients all the time, we can't control our thoughts and we can't control our feelings, but we get to control our behaviors. We can't control that initial thought that comes in of I suck, or I can't believe I caused this, or whatever, but I get to sit there I get to decide whether I get to sit there and figure out, am I to blame, or what I should have done instead, and the countdown from there. So that's where I get a choice of sitting there and doing that, or going and doing something that I value.
Yeah, I really like that. I've used the example here. I have tinnitus, right? And I've never been able to turn the volume of my tinnitus down, but
Mhm.
I have learned how to just live with it and move on with my life and ignore it. And it's loud now because we're talking about it, but it'll
Mhm.
fade into the background in about 5 or so minutes, and then I won't even notice it's there, even though I will still be hearing it.
Mhm.
And so what's the difference between my tinnitus and OCD? Mine's a sound, yours are words, yours are
Right.
images, yours are urges, something like that. But
Right.
in some ways, it's kind of all the same. It's that habituation experience and allowing for all of us to be able to sit with something that's uncomfortable and not have to do something about it because it's not worth the time or the energy to have to
Yeah.
do anything about, right?
No. Yep. Yep. Focusing on values and living your life towards your values.
Michelle, I'm going to
Yeah.
bet. I'm
Yeah.
going to make a wager here. You have a child,
Yes.
and I'm going to bet there are days you've thought about. I'm going to throttle you.
Thankfully, he's not super old enough that those days happen so much. But when he looks at me and then throws all of his black beans on the floor, that happened 2 days ago.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So,
And
yeah,
how dangerous is a thought becomes kind of the fundamental
yeah,
question that we kind of go with here, even in this rumination. Like, do I have to turn my brain off? No. Yeah. And I think maybe the question's a problem. That idea, any help with turning my brain off when this happens, that's not the question that I would even go down the road of trying to
no,
answer, because I don't know how to turn a brain off, right? The last time I checked, when the brain goes off, you're dead. Right. So that's
exactly.
it. So it's not about turning something off. It's about not caring that it's there.
Right. Because when we turn it off, then we're not accepting that those thoughts, and we're giving the thoughts power. We're saying that these thoughts are bad and we shouldn't have them. Right. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's see. As I go deeper in comfortably navigating the space of trauma and OCD, I'm realizing all the hidden, insidious ways OCD voices play out. Yep. Oh, that's for sure. I say, nothing about me is bad. The OCD says, you are. It'll say, see that bad thought and feeling you had. See how bad you are. Feeling my feelings has come to have a real sour taste because of how awful you felt after. In addition to compulsions, you would get in uh, because of how drained and awful it felt, until you started to see your current therapist at OCD. Oh, good. The role of humor has been crucial. I think both of us, Michelle, would agree,
Agreed.
and
Yep.
very much so. So Dana was curious um, about further insight on this, especially when it comes to the unique OCD voice that might even be tied to PTSD. Well, I'll just say this, but I'd love your
Yeah.
opinion. We know that OCD, being the serendipitous jerk that it is, will say, oh, wait, there was a trauma. Oh, I can make sure that that never happens again. You start doing everything that I want you to do, and I'll guarantee you there'll be no more trauma.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep. And I think, the OCD voice tied to trauma, there's no unique voice. OCD tries to present itself as unique in every situation, but this situation's different, or this situation, they're never different. It's all the same. I'm huge. I tell my new clients right off the bat, I'm a super sarcastic, super like joke person. And hopefully you get that. Some of my clients, not a fan, and we get through that. But yeah, I mean, if you allow OCD to control you, you're going to be miserable. And so, sort of like joking it, like we're not joking at your expense. I'm not laughing at you, but it's like let's really look at these thoughts. Like, if I do a handstand, will I really prevent that plane from crashing into the sea? Like, no. So I'm all about the regardless of what the theme of OCD is or where it's triggering, I'm
Yeah.
all about the comedy. But it also depends on the client. I'm not going to make a client be
Yeah.
funny or try to do comedy if that's not their thing.
I have always said to people, I'll be amazingly nice to you, but I'm going to be a jackass to your OCD, just so you
I
know.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how I explain it. So when someone says, was that me? It's like, well, what do you, would that be good therapy? That kind of thing, just
Yeah.
kind of getting people to recognize that you have hired me, right? You have brought me into your life, or the therapist that I train, you have brought us into your life, not to be kind to your OCD, but to be a relentless, just go-getter at trying to get it to go away.
Yeah,
And
my
we're gonna
job's not
use
to be your
all the
friend.
tricks. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Oh, Ipshita's back. Hi, Ipshita. Good to see you again. Hi, Doc. Yeah, I listened to your advice before, and you reduced your hand washing before touching your books, as you feared if you would touch them with unclean hands. That's right. You feared that God would punish you. But there are still days when it's really hard, of course, sure, not to stop the urges. I know it's not logical, and you know God wouldn't do such a thing as punishing you. I think, Michelle, we did talk about God, maybe have lots of things to deal with, but knowing you have an unclean hand about to touch your book, that's the worst thing in the world. I mean, there's war, decay, children dying, pales in comparison to a dirty hand touching a book, of course. Yes.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
and also a fear that if you somehow touch pubic hair lying around, then you'll become contaminated somehow and feel the urge to wash each and everything all over again. Please help. So, wow, let's talk about a few things. So, yeah, pubic hair.
My favorite kind of hair.
Yeah, the short round ones, why not? I mean, the curly short ones are the best, right? They kind of are everywhere. I mean, I always talk about if someone has a pet, that's just a walking around pubic hair, going around their home, traveling everywhere and touching. Every time it lays down, that dog or cat lays down on something, that pubic hair is just right on top of the couch or the bed or wherever it will be, right? And somehow no one cares about that so much, right? It's like that. So it's only human pubic hair that seems to be the bad kind of pubic hair.
Exactly.
And then how can we tell if a short hair is actually a pubic hair or not? I mean, I have, maybe I'm just covered it. Maybe this is all pubic hair up here too. It's short, it's a little curly. Maybe I have pubic hair head. I don't know. So now that I've
this could be your new nickname.
Hey, pubes. How are Pubes McGrath? That's me. Yeah. So maybe that's the case. Maybe I should now go wash my hands because how can I know, right?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. It's like what we deem good versus bad. Again, good versus bad, right? Why is pubic hair? I mean, I think we're so afraid of our private area, right? So pubic hair is bad as opposed to nose hair or head hair or ear hair or,
I mean, boy, the nose hair, boy. How about the ear hair, right?
Right? Exactly.
And just even this hair is right by the mouth, which is spewing saliva.
And maybe my husband always has food in his beard. Yeah. It's probably dirtier than pubic hair.
It could very well be, but OCD says, of course, oh no.
Right.
It's that groinal area.
It is.
That's where the pee and the poop and the white stuff comes from, and therefore that's a bad place, right?
Yep. Exactly. Yep. I know. Yeah.
So if you and then you have to decide, is your own pubic hair dangerous as well too, right? And what makes the pubic hair more dangerous than the genitals or the anus or anything like that? Why is the pubic hair more dangerous than something like that? And again, all sorts of things that OCD's made a decision and it wants you to go with it. There's no logic behind it. I can't give you the explanation. I just know that it is, and therefore that's the way that it is.
Right. Sometimes with pubic hair, it's like if we find it in a random place, then it's like, okay, is it mine or does it belong to somebody else? That's just more gross, right?
Yes. Yeah. But then during intercourse, pubic hair is touching pubic hair. So now they're kind of intermingling with each other. So we've had a cross contamination of pubic hair going on there too. So
and the funny thing is, with all of my clients with contamination OCD around sex, none of them have issues with pubic hair touching pubic hair. That's never come up.
I've never had it come up.
All fluids that I've issues with.
But I've also heard about fear of pubic hair, but not of it touching other pubic hair. So But maybe we've introduced a new fear to someone tonight. Let's hope not, but let's hope.
Job security.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Stacy says, I can't seem to stop resharing on my Facebook newsfeed.
Are you sharing interesting things?
What are you sharing? Yeah, right. And if it's a compulsion, if there's somehow a compulsion that's associated with that, our goal would be, how about tomorrow you just share one less time than you did today?
Right.
Let's start there. Yeah. And the next day, one less time from there. And the next day, one less time. And let's just do one at a time. You don't have to cold turkey stop this thing. We can slowly and gradually get you to the point of being able to do it and learning that you can handle it.
And I might even look at, like, if there's like certain things she's sharing where she feels like it has to be like the right story, or it has to be factual things, like maybe sharing things that are wrong or, different in some way.
Once again, a reminder, everyone, tonight's webinar brought to you by NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. We are available at nocd.com. Check us out for teletherapy across the United States, as well as Australia, Canada, and the UK. I'm joined tonight by my good friend, Michelle. Thank you once again for joining us, Michelle. Always a great time.
So happy to be here.
I'm going to give you a nice plug at the end, too. Give you a moment to talk about your clinic and everything, your peeps, and all that kind of stuff, too. And it will be recorded forever on the interwebs. So
yay.
That will be wonderful. Polly Fawn says, I think the bottom line to all OCD obsessions is to accept the uncertainty. Maybe, yes, I'm going bald. Maybe I'm a bad person. Maybe I don't love my girlfriend or boyfriend. Well, someone got it, right? There we go. Look at that.
You don't need therapy. You can be a therapist.
Yeah, there you are. You figured it out. I've used this example, Michelle. Maybe at some point during tonight's webinar, I'm going to run off camera. I'm going to go across the street with a Molotov cocktail and throw it at my neighbor Dave's house. Then I'm going to go in the middle of the street, poop in a bag, light it on fire, put it in front of my neighbor Josh's house, ring the doorbell. He's going to come out seeing a flaming bag of poop there. He's going to stop it, have a poopy shoe, and I'm going to laugh at him, shoot a couple of geese that are flying over my house, come back down here and rejoin you in the webinar. It is possible.
Very possible.
That will happen tonight.
Sounds like an amazing, what is today? Wednesday night.
Hey, I got nothing else to do, so why not that, right?
Exactly. I like it.
It's also possible that painting behind you will fall on top of your head at some point in time during our webinar as well.
It is very possible. It's also possible I'll just pick my nose on camera. Yeah. I do that occasionally. Yeah.
And yet, we're not going to do anything to try to stop any of those things.
Nope.
If you get a good booger, throw it in the mail with the check that you owe me for the
I will send it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. Yeah. You can use it to seal the envelope, actually. It's nice and sticky. So there you go.
I like it. Yeah.
Box of Wine, welcome back again. We get some of the most creative. I love the fun.
I know.
Hello, PB McG. He knows my rapper nickname.
No, I like that.
PB McG. Unfortunately, you cannot afford therapy, but you've been watching all the past broadcasting, trying to help yourself with harm OCD, but now you think you've turned them into a compulsion because you can't seem to make it through the day without watching them. Well, that could be a compulsion, yes. Yep. How would I go about stopping this? Also, the statue of a person head you have in past shows makes me uncomfortable. Michelle, let me show you.
I don't know about this statue.
I have a phrenology head.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
Michelle, do you want to tell everyone what phrenology is, or shall I?
You, please.
So back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, phrenology became popular. And phrenology was this head, and there's some writing on it. You could see all sorts of things. And what it does is it tells you about what they believed that spot on the head was related to in the brain. Now, if you used your brain a lot about that thing, the belief was that part of the brain would grow and would push on the skull and would cause a bump in that spot of your head. But if you didn't use that part of your brain very much, which means you weren't high on that kind of characteristic or what it was, that part of your brain would decrease in size, and that you would have a little gully or divot in your skull. So what they would do is they would have this, and then they would hold your skull and they would look in comparison, where were they on this part of the brain on you to this part of the head? And they would say, oh, well, that spot, that means trust. So there's a bump there, which means you're a very trusting person because of that bump. But this one over here, there's a divot there, which means you're not at all cautious, because that's the cautious part where our brain is. And yes, they believe that to be a science. And boy, sad, just unfortunate that was the case, because we've come a long way since then. I would have to say that we don't believe that to be true.
That's how I treat OCD. That's not how we're supposed to treat OCD.
No. I think you went to the wrong graduate school, Michelle.
Yeah. Well, I have that and my magic 8 ball.
Oh, yeah. I have this. This is, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's my magic decision maker. And I just, wherever the ball ends up, that's
I love it.
Which can be just as good as OCD making a decision for somebody as well, too. So box of wine, yes. I would say you start off with flipping a coin. If it's tails, you do watch my show. If it's heads, you don't, right? And you're going to have to then go through the day without doing it. And we're going to allow just chance to do it. And there's no more rethrows. You only get one flip of the coin, and you got to do what it says. And then you're going to start going through the day without watching it and just applying what you've learned and what we've talked about instead of having to watch it all the time and use that as kind of your safety behavior for the day. Okay. Elizabeth asks, I'm going to give this to you, Michelle, because you've done a lot with self-compassion. How do I handle OCD-driven shame?
Well, this is sort of Mike Heddy's thing. So
our buddy Mike, who's been here.
Yeah, he's awesome. So with lots of self-compassion and lots of self-compassion touch, there's so much shame around any kind of disorder, any mental health struggles. And so it's really looking at recognizing, number one, lots of people, everybody has mental health, right? Not everybody has a mental health disorder, but everybody has mental health. And recognizing you are not alone. There's a common humanity to this. And you've got, in fact, 3% of the population who's right there with you, if not more. But, looking at where that shame is coming from and what's being driven by it, what are your thoughts that you're having that's causing that shame? Why are you blaming yourself for your OCD? But just, I send you to self-compassion. Kimberly Quinlan has an awesome new book on self-compassion for OCD. I love Kristen Neff's book on self-compassion. So those are all fantastic places to get some great resources.
I'm always glad when we talk about shame and guilt and other things too, because the diagnostic manual talks about OCD as feeling anxiety, and it doesn't, it's just not broad enough because it's more than that. It's shame, it's guilt, it's disgust, it's any kind of uncomfortable experience or feeling that someone has. So I want us to always have that message out to broaden the idea of what OCD is. You don't just have to feel anxious. There's so many other feelings you can feel because of OCD.
Yep.
Someone says, as someone who's had OCD his entire life, I'd like to start asking, what makes you experts? Well, that's an interesting question, actually. I'd be happy to take that. I can tell you for me, I did a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at the St. Louis Behavioral Medicine Institute under the direction of Alec Pollard as his postdoc. Alec.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was Alec's postdoc for 2 years. So that changed my life, right? Got me into this field. And ever since then, and I have gone on to publish in the world of anxiety and OCD. I've written a book on OCD. I've done some of the hoarding TV shows and worked in that area. And I have been fortunate enough to work at hospital systems where they trusted me to open up 2 IOPs, a PHP, and a residential treatment center for obsessive compulsive disorder. I've been on scientific advisory boards for the International OCD Foundation as well as NOCD. And now I am the chief clinical officer for NOCD. So I think expertise comes in a couple of ways. It's not just knowing the stuff. It's, I think, practicing it well and also being able to teach it to other people who then can take what you've taught them and also practice it well as well too. And then to take a look at the outcomes of the work that you've done. And I'm proud of the outcomes we have at NOCD that show that the vast majority of people who utilize our service do get better and report that they have significant returns on their investment that they've had. So that's how I think. How about for you, Michelle? What would you add?
Well, whenever anybody asks me that question, I go back to I think I don't know that it's clinical definition. The definition in therapy world is what makes you an expert is at least we're doing 10,000 hours of treatment and experience with people. I have more than that. But I started out working in private practice and then started working at the UCLA OCD clinic where I did, intensive treatment. I was with patients. I would say between that and my private practice, 40 hours a week doing therapy for OCD and OCD spectrum disorders. In addition to that, then I was in the child program. And so getting experience there, I think, like you said, it's the time and hands-on time, not just a little bit of reading and I think it's the number of hours or the number of years that you've been working, that has that. You can specialize in something, which is sort of maybe you're just getting some training in it and you're getting your feet wet, and then there's that expertise level of, sort of fully integrating in it.
Yeah, and I think our job as experts is to help people specialize and then develop into experts, and so that's what we try to do. And I appreciate these questions. I think sometimes people might be afraid to ask their therapist these types of questions. What makes you a person who can treat OCD? I think you ought to ask those questions. Fred Penzel wrote a great article for the OCD Foundation about things to ask a therapist if you're going to use them for treatment for OCD. And don't shame or shy away from asking people questions about who they are and what they do and how they were trained and who supervises them and what kind of supervision are they still receiving, and what if there's an issue with their case, do they have someone that they can go to? That's what we've attempted to provide here. I know you do that at your clinic as well too, and that's how I think a lot of these clinics are set up. It's not just people doing things all willy-nilly. It's a group of people with a shared specialization, a couple of experts that are in that who are directing the whole experience to make sure that the vast majority of people who come to utilize that service are going to be better than they were after are going to be better after the service than they were when they started the service. So.
Yep.
Awesome.
Agree. Yeah.
Is there something I should watch out for when doing independent ERP?
I think the biggest thing is, and this is either independent ERP or working with a therapist not trained in OCD, is giving yourself reassurance or doing compulsions when you think you're doing exposures. And, pushing yourself far enough in exposure, not necessarily, making everything worst case scenario, but making sure that you're challenging yourself. I think that's where people struggle.
Yeah. Nicole says, could you elaborate on pure OCD? I'm happy to jump on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I talk about it like this. It's the occurrence of obsessions, which are thoughts or images or urges, and the response to those are mental compulsions. And that's what pure OCD is, right? It was given that name, and we go with it, but really that's what it is, right? It is the absence of behavioral compulsions and the presence of pretty exclusively mental compulsions. Now, I'll say this, I think, going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier with therapists and specialists and experts and things like that, there are therapists out there who miss OCD because they say, well, I don't see any compulsions. You don't have to see any compulsions.
Right.
Because there are some compulsions you're never going to see because they're all occurring up here. And so it takes the specialist and the expert to be able to root those out and figure out what they are. And know that you got to look for those too, and you can't just take what you see as, well, I didn't see a compulsion, so it can't be OCD, right? Or even people who don't know much of anything about OCD say, well, they weren't washing their hands,
right?
So how can they have OCD? There was no hand washing, there was no fear of being contaminated. In fact, their hands were visibly dirty. They must not have OCD,
or their room's a mess, so they must not have it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, Nicole, I hope that helps just with that notion of it is just a form of OCD that doesn't have behavioral compulsions and is still treatable. And that's what we want people to do, is we want people to know that is treatable as well.
Yep.
Daniel says, when doing ERP, I remind myself that I have to let go of the compulsion, but that results in it being kept in my mind. But when I don't remind myself, then I still do the compulsion as a reflex. Any tips?
I think probably what I tell clients is setting up a plan of like, okay, this is the compulsion I'm going to work on right now, and pulling, you talked about a couple questions ago of like addressing one compulsion at a time, and sometimes just changing it just a little bit. And so that helps. Or I have clients who will put up Post-it notes around their house just as reminders, because a lot of times compulsions are so automatic, like especially the mental ones, but it can be so automatic to just get into your hand washing routine or to start counting something. And so having that kind of visual reminder, or having a mindfulness counter clock on your phone to sort of like, remind you every hour or something like that to do an exposure so that you're consciously doing it.
I look at it in the grand scheme of therapy. I see great movement in having the compulsion, the idea of it being in your mind is a great improvement over doing the compulsion, right?
Yep.
And then now we'll work on allowing you to even work on letting that go as well too.
Yep.
I don't see that as a failure. I don't see that as a bad thing. I'm glad that you're working on not doing the compulsions, because that's obviously what we want. That's response prevention. That's the key part of, as Alec once said, exposure minus response prevention equals failure, right? So that is the equation for failure in OCD treatment. So now let's get to a point of doing what I think is the third component of this, not reminding yourself that you have to let go of a compulsion and not doing it. That would be step 3.
Yep, exactly.
Right. So, Daniel, you're one step away. That's where you got to go next, is to that step. At all, 0.03. Oh, Kaylee says, hello, Michelle. Kaylee, one of our loyal listeners. Hello, Kaylee. My OCD usually brings up the intrusive thoughts, and it feels like I need to answer it. What could you suggest for this? Oh, I'm going to let you go, but boy, I'm going to have fun with that one. So,
yeah. I mean, obviously, not answering is one option. Answering, this is where my sarcasm comes in, right? Is like, I'll be like, asked and answered, or, just making up nonsense responses. But just allowing the thought to even just be there without responding is a perfect exposure.
Michelle, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
You're old like me. You're probably not as old as me, but you're getting up.
I'm getting there. Yeah.
How many people have you treated with OCD who have said to you, you know what? I finally gave OCD the answer that it wanted, and then it let go and it went away. Zero.
Okay. Yeah.
Zero for me. Zero for Alec. Between the three of us, that's at least 75 years of treating OCD.
Yeah.
Between the three of us, that we've never once seen OCD say, oh, thank you for that answer. That satisfies everything that I was looking for. I'll now be leaving you alone.
Yep.
Yeah. The idea of answering OCD to a satisfactory level is an idea of ridiculousness, right? Because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Even if you were to give OCD an answer that it liked, it would then say, that's great. Now round 2.
It wants its lunch money.
Yeah.
It's not going to let you alone. No.
Never, ever, ever.
No.
I've used this example lately, Michelle. Tell me what you think. Charlie Brown always went to kick the football, and Lucy always put the football away. And as much as Lucy said, Charlie Brown, I'm not gonna pull up the football this time.
Yep.
I promise I'm gonna leave it there. Every time he went to kick the football, she pulled the football up, and he went flying through the air, landing on his back in a thud. That, to me, is one of the best cartoon ways to think about OCD. OCD says you just got to kick the football. It's right here. Look at how simple it is. All you got to do, just kick the football. That's it. Come on, Michelle, just kick the football. Oh, so close, Michelle. Try again. So close.
Right. I like that. I haven't actually thought of that one. I like that one. I might steal it.
Go ahead. I'll give you. Yeah. I'll give you that. But and even in an interview, Charles Schultz says Charlie Brown was never, ever going to kick the football. Lucy was always going to pull it away. And OCD is always going to say to you, so close, not quite enough, try again.
Yep.
And so where do people get stuck? They get stuck in the notion that they can actually achieve something that's unachievable.
Right.
They are Sisyphus. They are rolling that stone up to the top of that hill, believing that once they get it there, they will become a demigod, without knowing that the gods have tricked you, and the stone is 1 pound too heavy and the hill is 1 degree too steep to actually make it to the top.
Yep. Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah. I'm going to get nerdy on you for one more example.
I like it.
Did you ever watch Star Trek?
Not like on and off, not like consistently.
Anyone watching can YouTube this if you want to. There's an episode where Commander Data, who was the cyborg, right?
I know who he is. Yep.
Yeah. So or android. There's debates. Was he a cyborg? Was he an android? There's lots of debates on definition. Then so we'll just go. They said he was an android. So there's an episode where he's playing a game called Stratagema, and he's playing it against the known expert in the universe of this, and he loses.
Oh no.
And so the whole episode, he's running diagnostics on himself, wondering what's wrong. How can I have done this? How can I lose this? There must be something wrong with my processors and all these kinds of things. And he comes out in the end to find nothing is wrong. I mean, this guy is just that good, right? And so they play again. And this time, the guy's getting frustrated and frustrated and frustrated. And finally, he throws off the controllers from his fingers and he says, "You're making a mockery of me." And he storms out. And everyone said, "Data, you won, you won." And he said, "No, I didn't win, actually. I just played the game under the supposition that he assumed I would be trying to win. And I just played the game attempting to neutralize every single move. That no matter what I did or he did, I would bring us back to status quo." And that's where we have to go with OCD. OCD will always win if we're trying to play the game, but OCD will give up in frustration if we just live in status quo.
Exactly. It's like, I always tell my clients, it's like that repeat game when you're a kid, right? If you have siblings and you play that, like, you know, I repeat everything you say until the other person stops caring. The sibling who's trying to be super annoying will just keep doing it.
Right.
So you have to not engage with OCD. That's the only way to win.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. What do we got? I'm trying to ignore my OCD so I can drink water, eat, work, pray, or giving love to my kids. But the second I'm doing it, I get the worst thoughts, fears, and guilt. How can I make the feeling stop?
Can't. You just have to accept the feelings. I always tell clients, like, OCD always picks on things that are important to us, right? It's why I have clients who have newborns who have postpartum OCD, or teachers I work with who worry about saying something wrong to the parents that they work with. OCD is always going to take the opportunity to get you, again, it's that bully. It's going to try and take the opportunity to take things that are important to you and take them away from you. But you can't stop feelings. We can't control feelings. We can't control thoughts. So you have to tolerate that you feel uncomfortable. And then that's when you win, right? Is because I'm not listening to OCD. I'm feeling the feelings it wants me to feel, but I'm not listening to it. And I'm doing the things I want to do anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. In the world of OCD, you can never love your children enough. You can never be good enough. You can never be smart enough.
Can't be the best therapist.
No.
Yeah.
It just kind of is. And again, the trick of OCD is telling you you could achieve it if you just follow its directions.
Yeah.
You know, you can never satisfy the doubting disorder with a perfect answer because it will always doubt it.
Yep.
And there's the loop, right?
Yep.
How can I give the doubting disorder an answer it won't doubt?
Doesn't.
No one's figured it out yet, right? It's never ever happened. WD says, when my child conquers one compulsion, she seems to develop a new one. When will she stop this loop?
I think we find this so often when people are trying to treat a specific symptom as opposed to looking at the core fear of OCD. And so it's, again, OCD is that bully. It wants you to do what it wants you to do, and it's going to try and figure out a way to get you to succumb to it no matter what. So it's, I always describe it as like a person wearing a piece of armor, right? There's always pieces that the armor doesn't completely cover. And so the sword gets in there, and that's your OCD. It's trying to get you at the places that your armor isn't covering. And so the loop is only going to stop when she stops engaging in the compulsion, and that treatment is really addressing the overall core fear as opposed to the specific compulsions.
Yeah. And as always, we like to just remind parents to beware of the provision of safety behaviors and family accommodation in an experience as well, too.
Right.
And as difficult as it is to watch your child be uncomfortable, the best thing you can do is allow your child to be uncomfortable and learn that they can handle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But boy, that's tough for parents.
So hard.
Mm-hmm.
Or even family members, spouses, like siblings,
right.
Yeah.
Everybody to sit and watch somebody. Why wouldn't I just take this pain away from you? And yet, I've used this example. I've said, okay, so let's imagine that instead of OCD, they were on a detox unit going through detox from alcohol. And you went to visit them and they were sweating and they were throwing up and they had diarrhea. And they said to you, I feel like I'm dying. Could you please just sneak some vodka in here so that I will stop feeling this way? And everyone says, well, no, I wouldn't do that. Okay, so it's okay to physically be uncomfortable now in order to be better later, but it's not okay to be emotionally uncomfortable now in order to be better later. And that's been a big eye opener for a lot of people.
Yeah, I like that.
That is interesting, right? I would not sneak methamphetamine into my child's methamphetamine treatment clinic so that they could have methamphetamine to stop the withdrawal from methamphetamine. But I would make sure that I triple wash the pot before I make their dinner in it, or else they won't eat dinner. And sometimes we have to say, at some point they're going to get hungry and they're going to eat their dinner.
I know. I think that's where parents get so worried, is when it comes to sleep or food, right? We're so afraid our child won't, will lose weight or not gain weight, or not be able to sleep. And so we a lot of times it's the parent isn't comfortable being uncomfortable with the fact that their child's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Victoria says, can you talk about emotional or mental contamination? I think about a person's name who triggers me, and I replace the name with a good name and repeat tasks if I think of them, like walking in a room. Ooh, that's a good one. I like that.
I think this is the one problem with, I know there's a pro to like categorizing different types of OCD, but I think that this is the one problem with categorizing different types of OCD, is everybody feels like my OCD is different than this one. All OCD is treated the exact same way with exposure and response prevention therapy, right? So in this situation, if you feel the urge to do this mental compulsion of thinking the good name, the idea would be to work on not thinking the good name, tolerate the bad name being there. And I love emotional contamination. I think it's so interesting that I might get somebody's aura, right? But it's no different than if you had physical contamination or you were afraid somebody would get hurt. So I think that's sort of the downside to categorizing all the different types of OCD.
Yeah. OCD loves the words good and bad, or right and wrong, or contaminated or clean, or something like that. When
all those black and white thoughts.
There's no such thing as a good or bad thought or image or urge. And it's a made up thing that OCD tells you, you can have a thought about, your neighbor being hit by a car and wash the windows, and that's fine. But if the thought is about your child being hit by the car, then you need to rewash the windows. Or else, what if your child does get hit by the car and you didn't do that very simple task of rewashing the windows? Undo it just in case. Exactly.
Yeah.
My 7-year-old daughter has OCD. She's so afraid to have nightmares. She needs to ask me 60 times a day if it is the time for medication. She is in therapy. Well,
it goes back to what you're talking about family accommodation, right? This is on the parents, not blaming the parents, but this is on the parents to not engage in the compulsion. Again, this is where my sarcasm comes in. I don't know if it's time, I come up with some sort of funny response, but yeah,
absolutely. And then I would just want to know, when she does ask you about the medication, what do you do? Do you answer her and say not yet or later, or do you just ignore her? And you might start off the day with, I will be giving your medication to you when it's time to give you the medication. Today, you will get an hour and a half of screen time. But for every time you ask me if it's time for medication, I will be removing 5 minutes of screen time from your screen time.
Right.
Now, it's your choice throughout the day to ask me if it's time for medication or not. There will be a reward for not asking me, which is an hour and a half of screen time. And there will be a consequence for asking me, which is a loss of time for screen time.
I
Your
also
choice.
like, right. I also like doing like the tickets, right? So this is how many times you can ask me today, whether or not it's medication, right? And you, and I will answer those for each ticket you give me until you run out of tickets, and then I don't answer. But the thing I would ask is, she says she's in therapy. Is she in treatment with an OCD specialist?
That's always important to ask, right? And to make sure that we know that. So.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's always quick how things go from here, isn't it? I mean, look, we're almost at our hour. Michelle, I want to give you a little bit of time here at the end to be able to tell everyone again about what you do, your clinic, or anything's coming up, or any of that kind of stuff. So take it away.
Awesome. Well, I can do it really quickly because, we practice it. But so I'm in Los Angeles, California. We are doing teletherapy. I'm actually licensed in Georgia, Florida, and soon maybe Arizona. But I am the only one in the practice licensed in other states. But we treat all OCD and OC spectrum disorders, all anxiety disorders, hoarding, tics, Tourette's, BFRBs, all that kind of stuff. And you can find us online at anxietytherapyla.com. I do some Instagram, although I'm really bad at my work Instagram because sometimes I just need a break from social media. But my website's the easiest way to find us.
Cool.
Yeah.
And once again, we are NoCD. NoCD, a downloadable app you can get through Google Play or iOS. Check us out at nocd.com. We do teletherapy across the United States, and we are also in Canada, the UK, and Australia. And check us out. And we have the largest online community of people with OCD in the world. So it's so exciting. And I'm just going to run down some of these. It's always fun to go toward the ends here and just see what people have been saying about the... Kaylee's going to refer to me now as Dr. Pubes McGrath. Oh, that's good. Thank you. Thank you, Kaylee. Then we got a lot of ews for that one. Yeah.
I love it. It's so crazy because I remember when NoCD was like, I sat down with Steven to talk about it before NoCD became an app. And it's so awesome to see like the progression of where he started and where it's at now.
Yeah.
It's so different.
It is amazing. So, lots of things on here. People saying thank you to both of us for joining tonight. Let's end on this one. What's an ideal pacing for treatment, like times per week or something of that nature?
I hate that question. I hate. And how many successful treatments have you done? I hate them because they're so not reliant on me. Like, pacing for treatment, the average person who calls me in private practice, I would say once a week, at least looking at 6 months. I know manuals do 12 to 15 sessions. Either I'm a horrible therapist or the manuals are horrible. But I typically say to somebody, like, think about 6 months of treatment. Some people need more, some people need less, some people need more sessions per week. I always like, I was talking to a client today about whether or not IOP, PHP, or residential would be a good thing for them. But I always say, let's start at the very basic. Once a week, start there. And if that you can't be functional in that, then go up.
Yeah.
But I think it just all depends on the client, how motivated, the severity, their resources, all of that.
We have found, especially with teletherapy, because we're doing it that way, that twice a week has been really, really effective and gives us the quickest gains in reduction in symptoms that people have. And I think when you're doing it for teletherapy, twice a week works, because sometimes when you go in person, you're spending an hour driving there and an hour driving back, maybe, or something like that too. So you can get in 2 therapy sessions in the amount of time that you might have done 1 therapy session if you were doing it live as well too. So
the thing I will say, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please go ahead.
The thing I will say is, what I always used to give examples of is when I worked at the IOP, our patients were there for 6 weeks. They were there 30 days, Monday through Friday, 4 hours a day, and we saw a reduction of about 50 to 60% in their symptoms, right? So if that's sort of like your basis, the more times a week you meet, or the more you're doing the homework, the better you get, the quicker.
Absolutely. Well, Michelle, thanks for joining. As always, it's great. Hang on for a moment. We'll get out of here, and then I just something to ask you before you go. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Bye, everybody.